I like Super Smash Bros. Ultimate a lot, and the moment at which it was announced every single previous character would be coming back was one of the most hype moments in video games in general. But this Everyone is Here did do some funky things to the roster. Just look at the three links and everything about Fire Emblem representation. Almost all of the previous stages returned as well, which was cool, but gave the game a serious lack of variety in terms of stages. There were like 13 grassy plain stages, 3 stages based on the same level from Kirby, and 4 stages based on New York City. That might not be a big deal to some people, but the issues at least make the stage list feel awkward. Ultimate lacks direction with its stages, which makes it, at least in my opinion, not a very good roster of stages. But I think the series wasn't always like this. In fact, out of all the games, the one I think has the best selection of stages for their variety, aesthetic, and gameplay is the original one on Nintendo 64. Looking back on the stage list of Super Smash Bros. 64, what I instantly notice is the variety. Every stage's aesthetic and location is completely different from each other, to the point that no two stages look even remotely the same. Barring Meta, Crystal, Dual Zone, and Final Destination, which don't really count, we have a sky, an 8-bit zone, a storybook zone, a jungle, a castle, an alien planet, space, a grassy field, and a city. Honestly, I feel like this gives the stage list a sense of creativity and imagination, and it harkens back to a time where the series felt like a kid playing with toys, in a way that wouldn't make me feel like he's a psychopath. Every stage being so unique makes them all feel special and memorable. I think later on the design philosophy behind stages was to represent their original game as closely as possible, which makes it feel more like an advertisement rather than a showcase of the game's stages. It captures the content of the series, maybe less so the spirit of the original. In the first Super Smash Bros., however, they find a perfect balance between representing games and capturing this spirit of imagination. I don't have a problem with including lots of references or cameos. A lot of Smash 64 stages do that, and they have been done really well in games that come after, including Ultimate. I just have a problem with those cameos when it messes with the vibe of the location. When a Chozo statue ominously walks around in the background, or Pokemon are seen flying around in a world filled with them, it makes sense. When you're playing on the Blorbo stage from Suguru Deluxe, and the shopkeeper's son, the Scrimbly brothers, show up in the Scrangly mobile and just stand there watching your fight when they're party members in the original, that's when it gets distracting. Anyways, I do like a lot of stages that were introduced in Ultimate, but the design philosophy from which 64s were constructed just makes them more interesting to me. And Smash 64 has 1 Green Greens and 1 Grassy Plains too. Just saying. Now, one thing you'll probably have noticed by looking at footage is that the stages in Smash 64 kind of look like crap in Ultimate. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but the HD models being juxtaposed with stages that have gone through almost no changes since 1999 looks pretty bad. The stages just aren't polygonal looking enough to give it the modern characters and old games charm stages like Duck Hunt have. Although Duck Hunt is a grassy plain though. Okay, I'll stop now. Anyways, if you look at the stages by how they appeared in the original game, you see they look much better back then, and have so much charm to them. All of the stages are rendered to fit around the characters, but they also look just different enough from them to give it a dreamlike quality, that sense of imagination I talked about before. One thing I especially enjoy is how most of the skybox textures are left blurry and out of focus. Yes, this was probably due to hardware limitations, but to me it just seems to capture that sense of wonder that a kid's playset would have. The feeling when you can just vaguely remember a dream. Not only is this unique for the Smash series, this is a unique quality for fighting games in general. I at least haven't ever played one with the same feeling to it, and I love it a lot. Definitely makes Smash 64 going back to, even if its gameplay is more basic than the other titles. Speaking of gameplay, I've talked a lot about how the stages look and feel, but how do they play? Well, I think it's simple. It's just as good as the stage designs. The stages are pretty simple. Most of them are variations of the same layout, but it includes just enough different things to present you with a lot of fun options, and just enough obstacles to make each match different. Smash 64 is a very chaotic game, and the stages contribute a lot to this, with things like tornadoes or barrels, but it never really gets to the point where it distracts from the fun. It simply enhances it. Improvising and trying to work a strategy around a spinning barrel, for example, that can either save or end your enemies, is always a blast, and the obstacles never overstay their welcome. Something like a stage boss, which the other stages have in sequels, has always been a little bit too much for me and distracts from the actual sense of fun, which is why I like the simpler approach here. A lot of Smash 64 stages encourage slight alterations or fixes to your playstyle, which is a thing every Smash game does, but here it's just subtle enough so it doesn't distract from the core experience. In case you couldn't tell, by the way, this is mostly from a casual perspective. I'm not really talking about competitive side of things, but I do think some things I mentioned here are applicable to people who want to play in tournaments as well, or even just want to play competitively and improve their skills. I know only one stage from Smash 64 is currently tournament legal, so that might make Smash 64's stage list seem worse at first, but when you consider how many stages are banned in every other game, yeah, not really. Something like Congo Jungle encourages more aggressive behavior, getting closer to your opponents, while a stage like Hyrule Castle encourages building distance and avoiding the occasional tornadoes. Mushroom Kingdom is one of my favorite stages, because the piping encourages you to really play with spacing and positioning, and there are plenty of places to make fights distinct from each other. Overall, they're just super fun. It is unfortunate, but time hasn't really treated Super Smash Bros. 64 too well. There's not really much reason to play it competitively, and newer casual fans will often dismiss it due to not having as many characters and simpler movesets. Nintendo even has no plans to release it on the stupid shitty N64 app on Switch. But when you go back to it, you get an absolutely wonderful game that feels like a completely different experience from all that followed in its footsteps. It feels imaginative and whimsical, creative and wondrous, but most of all, it's just a very nice time whenever I go back to it. It might not be for everyone, but there's a reason it spawned such a big franchise. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you later.